Well, the latest is that 12 of those Ukrainian sailors have been officially detained, I think, for 2 months for all of them. So that's until after Christmas and New Year by the Russian authorities. There's 24 in total, and they're all going on trial for the same thing, a planned, deliberate incursion into Russian territorial waters as a group. That is what Russia accuses them of. Ukraine, of course, denies this on the basis that they're not Russian territorial waters if they're the waters off Crimea, and also on the basis that the Azov Sea, according to an agreement signed in 2003 between Russia and Ukraine, belongs to both countries, and both countries have equal rights of navigation into and out of the Azov Sea, and the only way into and out of the Azov Sea from the Black Sea is via the Kerch Strait. So the Ukrainians were quite within their rights, that's their point of view anyway, and it's also worth noting that Ukrainian military ships did cross into the Azov Sea through the Kerch Strait in September, and the Russians didn't object to it then. They actually even accompanied the boats.
Gulliver, it's also day one for martial law where you are.
I think day one is actually tomorrow. There was a little bit of confusion as to when the martial law will start, and not exactly where I am either, in fact, because Kiev is not one of the regions that's covered by it. In the end, President Petro Poroshenko had to dilute his martial law plan. He wanted it nationwide and for 2 months. It ended up being in 10 regions and for 1 month only. The 10 regions that are being subjected to martial law are the regions that border Russia or the breakaway province of Moldova known as Transnistria, which has Russian troops stationed in it, or of course Crimea, and a little bit also one part of Belarus. So there's 10 Ukrainian regions which are covered by martial law, and people are very vague about what it's actually going to mean. If you look at the text of the law, the possible provisions are very, very far-reaching, including very strong limitations on freedom of expression and freedom of movement. But President Poroshenko insisted that those provisions would not be used unless there was an actual land invasion by Russia. And the main practical thing that people I ask about it seem to be telling me this involves is simply that reservists have to be on call and they have to be ready to be at their bases within 24 hours. Previously, they had a bit longer in order to get to their bases.
Gulliver, we've gotten a lot of statements today out of Moscow warning of a further escalation. We've just heard from the Deputy Foreign Minister in the last few minutes who warns that sanctions won't solve anything. Deputy Foreign Minister, who's still saying that we have a common interest not to allow this incident to become an obstacle towards implementation of the Minsk Accord on eastern Ukraine. The Minsk Accord is that protocol that brings in France and Germany to try and move towards peace. It seems as though there's sort of parallel universes when it comes to what's actually happening in eastern Ukraine.
Yes, well, both sides do make declarations that seem quite far removed from what's actually happening on the ground. The Minsk agreement, though, doesn't cover Crimea, and in a way this situation is a situation which is more about the annexation of Crimea and the fact that by annexing Crimea and building a bridge across the Kerch Strait, Russia seems to think that it has acquired the right to fully control the Azov Sea, which the Ukrainians very much dispute. And the Minsk agreement is about the conflict that's going on in the Donbass region of mainland Ukraine, which is still going on. And so in a way they're separate issues, though of course they are linked. I mean, one of the main reasons that they're linked is Mariupol, the main port on the Azov Sea, is right by the front line and is crucial to Ukrainian steel exports and to Ukraine's strategy of trying to have at least an okay surviving economy in that region, so that people on the other side of the front line, the breakaway regions, look at Ukraine as a place that they might prefer to be living rather than in an unrecognized breakaway republic. And if Mariupol's port is not allowed to function because Ukraine loses control of the Azov Sea, that's a very big problem.